Beautiful Leslee Udwin. I know when we started planning this convention last year, Leslee, your name was one of the first ones that came out of the team's mouth at Canadians for a Civil Society as somebody who was really important to ground us in today. So for those of you that don't know Leslee Udwin was voted by the New York Times the #2 most impactful women, wow, of 2015, second to Hillary Clinton, and has been awarded the prestigious Swedish Anna Lindh Human Rights Prize, which was previously won by Madeleine Albright. A BFTA and multi-award winning filmmaker and human rights campaigner, Leslee's documentary, India's Daughter, has been critically acclaimed across the globe, has won 32 awards, including the Peabody Award and the Amnesty International Media Award for Best Documentary in 2016, and really has sparked a global movement to end violence against women and girls. The searing insights yielded by the journey making India's Daughter led Leslee to turn her back on filmmaking and devote herself to Think Equal Foundation as its founder. So in 2019, she received the Activism in Arts and Education Award from the UN Women and Peace Association, the UN Association USA's Global Citizen of 2019, and the Gandhi Foundation International Peace Award. And she's also been named Safe Magazine's Global Hero of 2015 and Global Thinker by Foreign Policy. So we definitely have somebody with a lot of intellect, thought, passion behind her. So Leslee, I'll welcome you to the stage and thank you so much for being with us here today.
Absolutely honored and thrilled to be with you, Renee. Thank you, Canadians for a Civil Society and the John Humphreys Center, Senator Roach, for your eloquent and wise and inspiring words, which have struck a huge chord with this next session, as I hope everybody will find out organically as the session proceeds. I just want to mention two things. One, a disclaimer. I'm calling you from a guest house in New Orleans, and I cannot control the environment. And so you may find other guests here going up and down stairs and making something of a background noise, but I'm sure we will welcome all of them. They're very warm and loving people here in New Orleans. I've just been at a National Head Start conference here, trying to introduce Think Equal to the USA, which is probably the most challenging thing I've ever embarked upon in my entire life. And that is entirely in line with what Senator Roach has just mentioned about Western nations being so obstinate about anybody's right to peace or equality. It's confounding. Anyhow, the other thing I want to mention is that the reason, as Renee said, that I would have been, and I'm thrilled that I was, one of the first names mentioned for this year's conference is only because I'm so old, and because there is such a long and beautiful relationship with Canadians for a Civil Society, who were pretty much here with me in the first breaths of the Think Equal movement and program. I'm going to get straight to that now, and shortly I'm going to present some slides. And I'm optimistic. I believe in miracles. Jessica knows how bad I am at technology, but with a good wind and some backing from all of you, I hope I will succeed. Well, here the slides are. I can see them, but guess what? They're too early. So we're going to take them off again, and I'm just going to talk to you for 5 minutes. What I want to do is tell you about the DNA of this movement that is Think Equal, and more importantly, this tangible, concrete toolbox program that is Think Equal. I was, as you'll have gathered from Renee's introduction, a filmmaker. I no longer make films. Films can only create awareness. We need much more than awareness in this slalom ride to potential catastrophe that we're all on. I went to India to make what turned out to be my last film and completed it 8.5 years ago. It was released on International Women's Day everywhere in the world except India, where it was banned. The film was centered on the horrific, brutal gang rape of a young girl on a moving bus in Delhi, whose life was cut short by 6 brutal men. And I got to India and decided there's absolutely no point in just making a campaigning film here. It's not going to get us anywhere. What I need to do is persuade the Director General of the prison that these men are incarcerated in to allow me in with my small camera crew and to look these men in the eyes and find out what kind of human beings do this to another human being. It was so brutal what they did to her, even after the rape, that I can't even mention to you the state that her body was in as it lay naked and bleeding on the side of the road. But what I will tell you is that the surgeons, over the next 13 days, when they tried and failed to save her life, said, we did not know which parts of her to join. I sat with these men for 31 hours over several months. And I found out what kind of human beings they are. And let me tell you, they were not what I was expecting. They were not the monsters, the psychopaths, the animals that I was expecting to sit across. They were ordinary, pathetically ordinary, normal human beings. They had been programmed to think as they think and therefore to act as they act. And they'd been programmed by who? By us, by society, by socio-cultural thinking in every single part of the world. And this is absolutely not an India-centric issue. You know that. The war against women and girls is alive and well, sadly, in every single country in the world. And 1 in 3 young girls have experienced sexual violence. 1 in 5 women have been raped. I'm one of those. The fact is, what I learned in those prison cells is that it's not the violence or the wars or the abuse that is the disease that we're dealing with here. Those are the symptoms of the disease. We have to be clear, the disease itself is the mindset that discriminates across human beings, that decides that you or he or she or they are of lesser or no value as compared with ourselves. That is the disease we have to eradicate. And we better start preventing as a world, because we're going round in circles. Conference after conference, we repeat ourselves endlessly. First, it was the development goals. Now it's the sustainable development goals. We're failing to meet those too. We have to become concrete in our efforts. It is not enough to posture or to, with great sincerity, mean what we say, but just to say it. It's not enough anymore. H.G. Wells said, civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And I think there was never a time on earth when those words ring truer. But the key question, as I discovered in those prison cells, the key question is, what kind of education? Of course, education is the engine room of progress. And early years education, as I found out in those prison cells, is the very engine itself. So I am now going to start presenting the slides, and I am hoping for the very best. Entire screen, share. Let's see if this works. It's on, is it? I'm going to trust to the fact that it's on. I cannot see the chat anymore. Yes, I can. Can somebody just tell me in the chat if this is not being shared? I need a sign that I can go on. Can someone jump into the conversation and help?
Hi there, Leslie. Yes, we can see you and your slides are proceeding as you.
The miracle has happened, and it will again when we need it to for the world and for human rights. Okay, thank you for that. Look, I got to a point in this series of interviews with these rapists and murderers where I remembered, and it kept on washing over my brain like a wave on a shore, Mandela having said, education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world. Now, as I've said, the question became what kind of education, and it became very poignantly so because having interviewed all the rapists and discovering that only one of them had finished secondary school and there was a decided lack of education amongst them, I then found myself interviewing their lawyers, and believe me, the greatest shock of all was that the lawyers were worse in their misogyny and their expressed hatred and derision of what a woman is and what she's for, etc. So clearly, it's not the kind of education that the world metes out to even our most so-called educated lawyers. So what is it then? And I looked in Mandela's work because I knew that a mind as brilliant as his could not leave the word education in such a seminal and important statement undefined, and he didn't. One of his most famous utterances is right here, and you've probably had a chance to read it. So just to summarize, a child is not born hating. If you can teach a child to hate, you can teach a child to love. So at that point, I decided no more films. I am going to dedicate the rest of my life now to literally teaching children to love. In order to do that, we need a system change in education because we have a missing piece. We have a missing third dimension to education. Alongside numeracy and literacy, we have to teach our children the innate components of what make up a life lived in respect of human rights. Social and emotional learning for well-being, psychosocial support, especially post-pandemic, and social justice. That is our definition of the type of social emotional learning, the third dimension, which we insist upon. And we say to education ministers and policymakers, if you really responsibly take seriously your duty of care to your youngest, most vulnerable citizens, your children, how on earth can you mandate numeracy and literacy and leave it as optional for children to learn how to value another human being, how to value themselves, how to lead healthy relationships? This cannot possibly be optional. Yes, I know there are certain countries, including Canada and the one I hail from, the UK, who will not mandate. I actually see that as a form of neglect of our children. All of this fine talk of freedom to choose is irresponsible when it comes to this very fundamental tenet, which is that our children have a right to peace. I welcome, and this is where this beautiful confluence of the news, the very welcome news that Senator Roach brought us from the UN, this new framing of the notion of the right to peace. I believe children have a right to grow up and not rape. They have a right to grow up and not be raped, of course. And they have a right to grow up, our young boys, and not commit suicide, which is the number one killer of our young men under 40 the world over. I was no expert, you know that. I was a filmmaker. I had everything to learn from scratch. I gathered round me 22 global thought leaders and experts. Sir Ken Robinson, experts from education, from psychology, Dr. Marc Brackett, down at the bottom of the right-hand column there, his picture, and Dr. Robin Stern, the co-directors of the Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence. Underneath Sir Ken on the right-hand side, Richard Davidson, one of our neuroscientists who formed this committee of 22 experts. And then we had a series of human rights champions and experts. Dr. Urvashi Sani, top of the left-hand column, for example, who's an expert in empowering girls through education. And together they helped us create the actual materials, not just a theoretical, conceptual framework, a list of objectives and outputs. That's not good enough. It's not good enough when it comes to early childhood, because we have this massive disconnect where we've been treating early childhood education for the longest time as an add-on, a babysitting of children while they play and their parents go out to work. These are the very fundamental years when the brain is being built. And we know from neuroscience that by 6, the brain is pretty much built, 90% built by 5. If you look at this graph, one of the many that express this is from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. That pink line, which dips and virtually disappears just after the age of 6, emotional control. Habitual ways of responding, a dark blue line in amongst the nest there of that curve. These are set by the age of 6. So anything we want to do to come in and create a more pro-social mindset or more pro-social being will take the most enormous amount of effort after the age of 6. Why are we not in there taking these brain-building early years seriously and building with our children, co-constructing in a partnership of serious learning, which children between 3 and 6 are more than capable of? Pro-social neuro pathways in the developing brain. The program itself, there are 3 main pillars: well-being and mental health, so critical now as a COVID response. I have started to hear talk from some of our education authorities that we're working with across the world of a lost generation. And as all things in our world, we start getting pretty inured to concepts fairly quickly. Heaven forfend that this notion of a lost generation should take root. We have to act urgently. This is an absolute emergency. We have children whose development has been stunted and arrested by 2 years. I mean, this was pretty unprecedented in the world. So one can't even blame governments who just shut down schools because they didn't know what to do, but they took absolutely the wrong decisions in retrospect. And these policies were devastating to our children, to a whole raft of children. And we have to act on this urgently. Psychosocial competencies, pro-social competencies and skills like empathy and critical thinking, self-esteem, so critical. All of these, our children have a right to them. They're not going to absorb them from a troubled, selfish, greedy, and indifferent world that surrounds them, and overly busy world, including their parents. They're not going to absorb them either in terms of social justice, which is so critical, as we all know here today. They're not going to absorb them from parents who have entrenched in their hearts and minds prejudices. Prejudices and biases get cyclically, generationally transferred down the line. This needs to be disrupted. Our children have the right to have all of those competencies that are required for social justice for themselves and others. environmental stewardship, gender and racial equality, etc. We brought in from wherever we could pre-existing programs. What we found overwhelmingly is that 90% of programs begin at the age of 6. And the early years are so sadly neglected when it comes to anything concrete that can go in the classroom, be put into the teacher's hands, and work their magic as tools on our children across the world. 25 competencies and skills that we teach, no less than that. And they're all in this heart. And we believe that these all work together. You can't have gender equality without inclusion. You can't have emotion regulation without emotional literacy. And may I say, because I do want to start moving through this fairly quickly, I always take much longer over the introduction. It's my terrible flaw and weakness, and I try and I get a little better every time, but it always takes longer than I would like. So I am more than happy to send this and other material to anybody who is interested. So I'm going to zip through a little bit faster now, but do please put a note in the chat if you want me to send you anything, and I will. The program, the structure, repetition is so important when it comes to building pro-social neuropathways. So we have 3 lessons every week. Half-hour lessons are enough. Teachers do tend to sometimes spend up to 45 minutes, but that's because the children enjoy the debate, even at 3, and the discussion so much. 3 lessons, 3 times a week. There are 30 weeks of term time. So what we give each teacher is a 4.5 kilogram box in which there are 90 lesson plans in a lesson plan booklet, 3 a week for 30 weeks. There are 50 plus resources and 24 narrative picture books, 1 a week for 24 of those 30 weeks. And then the themes in those books are unpacked through the lesson plans and resources during the course of each week. And there are 3 age-appropriate levels, each one with completely different sets of materials. There is a 4th level, which transcends any notion of age, is generally speaking from 3 till 12, and they are, or those materials are for emergencies, refugee and IDP settings. That is the level that we're currently using in Ukraine, in Ukrainian. There is a short 5 hours digital training. We also, of course, customize and go in and train face-to-face in many parts of the world where so many are not digitally linked. But it's not a big training that is needed. And the reason for that is that we had to be realistic about the urgency of getting this to our children before they escape that net of optimal modifiability and brain absorbency. And in order to do that, we couldn't spend the next 60 years training up a workforce in a subject that has never hitherto been taught. That's not a good way of doing it. The human race might be extinct by then. So we decided to make the actual teaching a training. And there are very clear step-by-step lesson plan guides that teach you how to teach empathy, that train you while you are teaching. These are some visual examples. You can tell by looking at the books what the competencies and skills they deal with are. You have the mood meter here from Yale, which they so generously gave to us for free, so that this movement could prosper and thrive. We have the shades of brown cards, as we call them, which prove observably prove that there is no such thing as white people or black people. If the girl in the corner, top left, were white, if I were white, well, what color's the paper on the side of her portrait then? These are different colors. If the little girl in the top row were black, as the children will say she is, because that's what they've been taught, well, what color is her hair then? The truth is that every single human being on earth has melanin in their chemistry. And every single human being on earth is brown. Every one of us, we're just different shades of brown. You have parenting cards up top right there, which show both men and women involved in the rearing of children, one of the most noble and beautiful things a human being can do. This is just a more in-depth view of the various materials. Every lesson plan lists the objectives, of course, of what is expected by the end of the week from our children, the resources that are needed, and the teacher has, or practitioner has, every single one of those resources in mostly her, sometimes his box. The vocabulary, which is optional, but the children learn these words. They have synaptic connections firing at the rate of 1 million connections per second. They are far more advanced than we are in brain power. Beyond the classroom, very briefly, we have digital iterations. We have animations of our books narrated by some of the world's most wonderful actors, novelists, Chimamanda Adichie, Olivia Colman, Meryl Streep, Emma Thompson, Dame Helen Mirren, etc., David Oyelowo, Sophie Okonedo. We have home iterations. We engage the parents by sending home 5 10-minute activities per week, which are centered on the same learning so that the parents can support the children. And we even have a 40-part television series, which we give to countries for free, because anything digital that doesn't cost us, we give. We're a charity, by the way. We're not a curriculum vendor by any means. There is a cost to this material, but it's pathetic. It's minimal. We have, of course, the objectives of reducing negative behaviors and attitudes, increasing pro-social behaviors and attitudes, and supporting our children with sustainable development. We've had 3 randomized control tests in 3 very disparate countries, Botswana, Australia, Colombia. The same results. Children are children the world over. Human beings are much more alike than they are unlike. A massive diminishing, statistically significant, of course, of anger and aggression, of anxiety and withdrawal. A strong and powerful increase in empathy and well-being, in emotion regulation. During the pandemic in Colombia, illiterate mothers who were on the other side of a digital projection in which a teacher was reading to the children the books, illiterate mothers learned to read from Think Equal over the course of a year. And teachers themselves had massively increased well-being as a result of the program. I'm not going to go into detail here. I could talk about this alone for 2 hours. This 60+ years worth of research, which sits languishing on shelves, which proves that when you teach social emotional learning repeatedly with a comprehensive seriousness in early years, it lasts a lifetime long, and it has extraordinary positive outcomes later in life. Where are we now? I want to end on an optimistic note. We're in 31 countries. 374,000 children at very minimum so far. That's counting only year 1, because we haven't yet had the army we need to continue to monitor how many of these thousands of classrooms around the world are continuing year after year, but every year it's a doubling of this figure. And we've been going now for 6 years since our first pilots. I just want to point out 3 things that would interest you, I hope. One, we are in Canada. We are in the whole district of Peace Wapiti. The kindergartens and junior kindergartens there, the equivalent of the council, and forgive me, this started 5 years ago, and I don't remember the name of the authority in each country because we deal with so many, but they took this for every single kindergarten and junior kindergarten. We've had some of our most beautiful stories come out of, and we have thousands, as you can imagine, of positive stories. Gail MacDonald, one of the principals in the Peace River district, told us of a child who was virtually expelled. At the last moment, she stopped the group of parents who had called an emergency meeting from expelling this child and said, "We can't do this to a 3.5-year-old. This is going to predict his negative future for the rest of his time if we do this. We have to try." And we've just started this new program this year called Think Equal. Let's give it a go. 5 months later, she was writing to me to say she watched this child interacting with 2 others. This was the most violent child she'd ever come across in her teaching career, who had joined at 3.5 and was destroying and hurting, and really the parents called for his expulsion because he was hurting their kids. 5 months in, she said she watched this boy put his arm around another child who was getting upset because they were playing some memory game and this child wasn't doing very well. And the so-called violent child by now put his arm around this other child and said, "Don't be sad, you can do it, I can help you." There was never another violent incident from this child, and we almost doomed him. Okay, in 4 of these 31 countries, 4 of them, the education ministry has made Think Equal compulsory for every single child across their countries, alongside numeracy and literacy. That is going to fundamentally change the fortunes of these 4 countries. And that is our system change, is ultimately our goal. And we have achieved it now, thank heavens, in 4 countries, which means it's doable, and we will keep going. And finally, I just want to tell you about the UK. England is a country you can't mandate anything in because, as I said earlier, everybody must be free to choose whatever they want to choose. I went to an enlightened mayor in England called Andy Burnham. His name should be shouted from rooftops, and so should the name of the mayor of Monterrey, Mexico, who is funding Think Equal for every single one of his children, Mexico's 2nd biggest city after Mexico City. He himself is funding it for every child across his city on all 3 levels. In England, Andy Burnham decided this has to be given to all of his nurseries and all of his local reception classrooms. They couldn't find enough money in their school readiness budget, so they went on the hunt for support. Who is funding 62,000 children in the UK to get this program? Some of those are being funded by the National Health Service of England, mental health and education teams. And a large number of the nursery schools are being funded by the Violence Reduction Unit of the police, not the education ministry. No, they're not enlightened enough to understand the need for this. But the police and the mental health teams, they know because they see the bodies piling up and they know the power of prevention. Partnerships, we can find out about that elsewhere. Teacher quotes, I hope you'll ask for this so that you can see some of these teacher quotes. They are just so heartening. Heartening because they show us there is a way to avert this catastrophe. And we end with some quotes from our Think Equal learners. our little ones. We love each other with our hearts, said one child, 3 years, 11 months. I loved learning about why I am unique. I also like learning about how everyone has different skin colors and that we are all special, 4 years, 10 months. I'm going to end with a quote from Gandhi, who said, if we want to achieve real peace in this world, we're going to have to start with the children. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the presentation. And please, somebody take it off for me.
First of all, Leslie, thank you very much. What a powerful and passionate presentation, and your slides were very informative. And I also would like to apologize for my technical difficulty getting online, and Edward helped me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie. And now I would like to introduce 3 panel members. One is Anna Kirova, and she is a professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta, with international experience in education, and she has won numerous awards for her research. Anna is going to talk about children's rights in general and rights-based education based on her extensive research in the field. And the second person I would like to introduce is Lee Makovichuk, who is assistant professor at McEwan University, where she teaches early learning education. Lee is the lead author of the Alberta Early Learning and Care Framework. Lee's presentation will be on application of children's rights reflected in Alberta curriculum framework. And the third person I would like to introduce is Afshan Amjad. He is assistant professor at Northwest College, and she's a full-time faculty at Early Learning and Childcare Program. Afshan's presentation will be on what it means to apply children's rights on a daily basis and about using Alberta framework on childcare providers. So we will start off, and by the way, at the end of their presentations, they will give their reflections on Think Equal and similar programs. And then if you have time, we'll take Q&A. So now we will have Anna. I invite her to come and do her presentation.
Thank you very much, Vassam, for the introductions, and what an honor to follow Leslie's powerful, very passionate presentation, and very humble by the fact that I am the next one presenting after you, Leslie. But I have been thinking about what you said about our neglect of early childhood years, and especially those who work with young children. We have seen these very dedicated professionals as babysitters, as you said. And so for us in early childhood education, who work with teachers and early childhood care providers, this has become a center of our effort to improve the conditions for learning for young children by increasing the level of education of early childhood educators themselves. So it is very important. What you're doing is to educate the teachers, to bring the knowledge base, to bring the research to them. And this is exactly what we have been doing in our institutions. We have been trying to elevate the overall level of understanding, not only of child development, not only of brain development, but also to take into consideration the very challenging and complex context in which young children grow up today, and witnessing war, being affected by war, being affected by poverty, being affected by, as you said, COVID is one such experience that previous generation didn't have. So all these very complex ecologies require early childhood educators to have really deep understanding of what it means to grow up in this complex and confusing and frightening world. It is frightening for us as adults. So having children's social and emotional development at heart, as your program and the program you're talking about is really fundamental in our understanding of the future of these children and how they move forward in their lives, not being affected as much as they have been and are due to circumstances that they find themselves. And so in our own work, in my own work, I have really focused on the rights of minority children or minoritized children. Because, as you said, it's all learned. It's learn how we look at differences and change the mindset, looking at differences not as deficiencies, but looking at differences as richness, as possibilities of actually working together, enriching one another's lives and bringing different perspectives in the world. So minoritized children, unfortunately, even in Canada, which is one of the best places in the world in terms of accommodating differences, and is one of the few places in the world that has fundamentally, human rights and children's rights presented in our Federal Multiculturalism Act, which is now over 50 years old, which brings the diversity to the point in which we collaborate with each other. Our national image is a mosaic, something that I have challenged because mosaic pieces don't talk to each other. We need to interact with one another. We need to be listening to one another. But this is something that even in Canada, having differences as deficiencies have been a challenge for educators for a long time. So in the human rights and children's rights perspective, children's right to participate in their education has been central to us, because not all children have an opportunity to participate in their education equally because of who they are. And because of the accents that they have, or because of the skin color that they have, or because of the socioeconomic status that their parents have, or any other religion, any other difference that is seen as being less than. And so being seen as equal, participating equally in the programs that we provide for young children has been part of not only my research, but also my teaching for so many years at the University of Alberta. And both Lee and Afshan are former students of mine, and they have been carrying on this kind of learning, I hope, to their own students and the people that they interact with. So there are two really interesting and contradictory images of the child that the Convention of the Child of the Rights of the Child contain, and we are trying to do both in early childhood education. And one of them is the need for protection. And the Honorable Douglas Roche talked about it, and the fact that so many children are being killed or injured or traumatized by war and what they're witnessing on a daily basis is an example of our failure to protect the children. So the children are of need of protection is one of the image of the child that the convention itself is projecting. And unfortunately, this image of the child as needing of protection sometimes in practice is understood to be somewhat diminishing the child because they're not capable. We need to protect them because they cannot do it themselves. So this, in effect, is against the child's other very important part of the convention, the child's right to participate. So we have these two contradictory images embedded within the framework, Children's Convention, Convention on Children's Rights. And so in practice, they contradict each other. And in practice, we cannot always resolve this tension between the two. So in our framework that has been developed in the province of Alberta under the leadership of Lee Makovichuk and other colleagues from Grand MacEwan, and in our daily practice that students learn how to be with young children, such as frontline childcare providers, we try to see children as capable, so that the participation, the right to participation, puts the image of the child as capable, as agentic, as being not only capable, but having the right to be heard, to be listened to be taken seriously, to be the center of attention, and to present their rights, to choose who they play with, how to present their knowledge. These are the fundamental aspects of the convention that we have been trying to implement in our own research, in our own practice. So I'm going to invite Lee at this point to talk a little bit more specifically about how the language of the convention has influenced the framework that she developed with her colleagues from Grand McEwan, and some of the issues that you brought, social emotional development, for example, as being central. The idea that children are co-constructors of knowledge alongside their teachers. They are not just absorbing knowledge. They are not tabula rasa. They already are in the world. They already are citizens. They already know how to learn. It's just that they need to co-construct knowledge with knowledgeable professionals, and that's what we do in post-secondary institutions. So with this, I would like to invite Lee to comment a bit on that. So because I'm very mindful of the time, and I would like also Afshan to have time to respond. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Leslee, for that very provoking presentation of the Think Equal Foundation and the work that you're doing around human rights, particularly focused on young children. And as Anna's talked about already, is that in Alberta, the Alberta Flight Framework is an early learning and care curriculum that promotes children's family, social, and cultural practices and traditions as a foundation for their care, play, learning, and development. This social cultural framework focuses on children 0 to 5 years of age, that embraces their play and their inherent rights as citizens already. Early childhood educators use this framework to nurture children's agency as social players and valued community members. Towards this end, in Flight, we articulate 5 really important core concepts that make visible a playing, thinking, learning child, the citizen of early learning and care communities. Flight's image of the child, as Anna already suggested, is this strong, capable, resourceful, agentic child. And this does not take away the importance of protecting and providing for young children. In fact, it actually incites educators who believe children who are strong, capable, and resourceful. So they provide a rich play and learning environment that is safe and provisioned with materials that reflect children's interests and ideas and cultures, and participates with them in ways that communicate that what they bring is valued for shaping this place of caring, playing, and learning. Flight's a practice of relationship focuses on relational practices strongly connected to children's families and communities. When educators believe that families and communities have valuable contributions for the curriculum, they engage with them in co-learning and co-researching and co-imagining possibilities that arise from their individual and collective strengths. Being in a relationship in ways that value people and what they bring reverberates into robust, vibrant, and contributing connected communities where children flourish and grow. Flight's Mighty Learners is a concept that recognizes children's dispositions to learn that are important for children in the early years and also for people across a lifetime. Playing and playful, seeking, participating, persisting, and caring are enacted by children in their play and approach to familiar and novel situations. Educators notice, name, and nurture children's dispositions to learn, and in doing so, they bring value to these ways of being for each child and for our communities. Flight's responsive environments offers educators many reflective questions to consider and wonder about in relation to who each child is, and individually and as a group member, and as they change and grow over a month, a year, and several years. Children's inherent right to participate is vital for understanding and evolving responsive environments. As children grow, so do their ideas, their abilities, and their social relationships. Attending to children's growing capacities is about reflecting each child in the play materials and the organization of space and time. In a responsive environment, children express their ideas and preferences in matters that concern them, and their right to participate is respected and honored in all matters. Listening to children is not just a nice thing to do. It is about valuing the perspective that children bring. Children see the new in the familiar and everyday. They are not numbed to what happens daily, and so they marvel and wonder and seek to know and engage in a world as if it begins each day with the rise of the sun. Children are also keen observers of the discontinuity in life, the disconnect between what adults say and what adults do. This is often confusing to them, and they let us know in many ways, both verbally and non-verbally. And if we are truly listening to them, we adjust and become more cohesive in our messages, in our actions, and how we are with others. This is what we gain when we listen to children's voices. Flight's transitions and continuities is another core concept that bridges the many communities that children navigate in the early years. This core concept provokes educators to consider relational practices across communities, groups, and daily transitions. When educators build strong communicative practices and relationships across multiple communities for children's transitions, children are not alone in them. And it makes a difference for how each child sees themselves as they move through their worlds. In addition to the 5 core concepts, the Flight framework articulates 4 holistic goals: well-being, play and playfulness, communication and literacies, diversity and social responsibility. These are not outcome-based goals, such that are articulated in school-based curricula. Instead, educators use these goals towards understanding what children are doing and trying to make sense of in their play and interactions. Educators extend and expand these opportunities by making meaning of the moments that captivate children and each child. The Flight framework is designed to guide educators to begin with children's play for building a caring, rights-based early childhood curriculum. And it does this by engaging educators through reflective questions and resonating ideas. It is our intention that Flight inspires early childhood curriculum as a way of being together, a living, evolving way of life in early learning and care programs that engage children, participating meaningfully with educators, families, and community members, and as shapers of their social and cultural worlds. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to pass this over to Afshan.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm very pleased to hear about the right-based education, and Leslie, your presentation was amazing as well. I'm happy and thank you for introducing flight curriculum to us. So, these are lovely ideas which we have in flight. And being an instructor at Northwest College, I am directly involved in training our instructors to go in the field and work as early childhood educators over there. So I just want to summarize some of my experiences over here. Our students are coming from diverse backgrounds. So their reflection about children's rights and their understanding of children's rights is sometimes very diverse as well, very different than what we have in Canada. So I found the image of the child in flight as a mighty learner, as a citizen, is very helpful because it gives them a new perspective sometimes. which is totally different than their understanding, which they have already from their diverse backgrounds. A child who is strong, resourceful, capable, this idea helps my student reimagining and revisioning their own image of a child. And and it addresses the many rights of the child, as the child's rights to be listened to be treated with respect, and participate in daily decisions that affect him or her. So I find it very helpful in that way. I also try to use that idea of playful learning, which is the focus of flight, and I try to bring experience opportunities for my students where they can create hands-on and hands-on activities for children, and open-ended activities for children where they can explore. Children can choose what they want to do by themselves. And I also like the idea of that co-constructing of knowledge, where role of educator is defined in the flight, as well as a co-researcher, co-imaginer of possibilities and co-learning, because that give my students a vision that they are not alone in the learning process. They have to include families, they have to include their colleagues, and they have to include children in this whole process. So this is a whole process in all members are included. It's not only one. It's not only between the teacher and the student. It's also between the families and colleagues. And another thing which I focus in my teaching is observation, because I noticed that different people who are coming from different backgrounds, as Leslie, you said, have their own cultural understanding about different things, and sometimes that affect their observations, because the interpretation, the meaning which they are making out of those observations, sometimes is very different. My focus usually when I am teaching my student and using the flight curriculum is that I will teach them how to write observations which are not biased, which are non-subjective observations. So they can, which not affect their own understanding about the world in it, and in this way they appreciate, they respect children right to participate and have their opinion, because that meaning is unbiased. Um, uh, there are policies which are beautifully having children rights in it, but usually those policies are not implemented um, in the practices. So that's another effort. We always try to make our students learn how to bring policies to the practice level. And we have different courses in our program which we use for that purpose. There are few issues over there as well, such as that at diploma level, we don't give our students usually tool which they can use to research, because there's so much going on right now about children rights. So which students need to learn how to find those new researches every day. But sadly, our programs are not preparing our students to do research, and and they are not aware about how to find authentic and non-authentic sources over there. So that's also a focus of my teaching, that I always try to teach my students. I try to give them a tool which they can take with them when they will finish their diploma programs and go into the field. And that's the only thing which can make them different than the babysitters, when they will be aware about what's going on globally about children rights. And that's a big gap in our system. And I'm trying to advocate that at my college level, that we need to improve that. And another thing is wages, because our wages of our educators are very low. I don't know about the global, but I heard that this is the situation everywhere, and that's why people are considering them babysitters while we are the doctors of the children. I think so. Our jobs are equally important as doctors, because we are helping our children grow. And so that's because our wages are low, people are not giving us that respect that we should have. So, and when teachers don't have those wages, definitely they will not have time to professionally develop themselves. They are just doing those low paid jobs. They are busy in uh, earning their they are so busy in improving their financial situations that they don't have time to invest in learning more about children's rights. So these are just few, and then when we send our student to practicums, we closely observe them. But sadly, there are different practicum sites which have different standards over there. And again, the center, the education level of the educators over there, and then the parents' social status, and there are so many factors over there which are affecting. So I love teaching my student flight, and I think this is a very good framework which make them to think about children's rights. But there are so many other factors which are affecting our teaching, and we need to address them if we want to make our educators advocate who can speak for children's rights. So that's just few suggestions and some appreciation for the flight from my side.
Thank you very much, Anna, Lee, and Afshan. It was powerful. All of you had powerful presentations, and we have got 4 minutes extended now. So if you would like to, all 4 of you would like to give some reflections and make some final comments. Remember, we have got only 4 minutes left. So who wants to start? Leslie, you want to start off? You're on mute, Leslie.
Thank you, Vasant. I think in so many ways we are saying the same thing, and sometimes in different ways. But I am still obstinately holding on to my belief, which I believe with every single cell in my anatomy. We have to give the tools to the educators. And Afshan, you were saying something incredibly similar. We sort of began and ended with a very similar exhortation. We cannot expect early years educators who have been undervalued, underpaid. You know, it's so bad. You asked whether it's the same in the rest of the world. In some countries, let me give you the instance of Malawi, which is a country that we're moving into now with a very, very big army of Think Equal. In Malawi, 33,000 early years educators. Only 2,000 of them get any kind of minimal stipend. The other 31,000 are volunteers. Imagine that. They don't get any pay at all. Early years educators are more important than prime ministers, for heaven's sake. They hold our future in their hands. They're not just here for 5 years. They hold eternity and the next generation of our children and what will become of them in their hands. They should be the highest paid in our society. It's utterly shooting ourselves in the foot the way we've been carrying on. And no wonder we have the violent world that we have. What else would we have when our priorities and our values are so utterly upside down? But please, let us not expect early years educators who have been treated so badly hitherto to know what a framework means. When you put out beautiful, wise, eloquent, theoretical, academic words, they don't get it. They don't know how to translate this at the coalface in their classroom into what book do I choose? What poems and activities do I curate? Where do I even have the time to find them? So please, if you want to create your own version of Think Equal, please do it, but do it fast, because it is urgent. And every child of 6 who escapes the net of having been given concrete, tangible, multifarious and many competencies and skills is lost. It's as simple as that. And we can talk about this in several more conferences and get nowhere. We need to give the tools into the teachers' hands. There is no other remedy here, and there is no other solution for the human rights violations that we see proliferating around us day in, day out.
Afshan, you want to, since you come in close contact with the trainers, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, I completely agree with this, Leslie. But sad point is that usually those who are teaching in early in EC, the field of early learning and childcare, one thing which I saw lacking in them is they don't have that level of education, which, and I can understand that education doesn't mean the degrees only. There are so many factors but they need professional development on a continuous basis. We train them, we send them in the field, but after 10 years or after 15 years, they need
We haven't
training.
got that time.
And but centers are not ready to invest money in them. I noticed that. My personal observation is that, and
that's right.
I was thinking about Think Equal, and I was thinking that we need that kind of things. And Flight, thank God we have Flight in Alberta, which is helping us. But still, we need a check and balance after that. I know that we have licensing in Canada, which is supervising, which is checking the standards over there. And previously, we have accreditation, which they finished. I don't know what was the reasons, but we need more of such kind of things where we check and balance and we provide professional development to. It's not a business, because EC is not a business. It should be something which beyond money,
Can I just answer, Vasant, please, or do we just have to move on? Because, I mean, I agree. Professional development of teachers is a crucially important goal, but as you said, 10 years and a lot of money. So it's not realistic to solve our immediate emergency in that way. We have to be doing that in parallel. But while we are hoping to raise the trillions it'll take to properly give professional development to all of our early years educators, at least put something in their hands that costs virtually nothing. No, the cost of Think Equal is $290 per classroom as a one-off cost for the next 20 years. It's less than $1 per child when it's amortized. You can give this program, and I'm not, I'm saying use other programs if you want to, or if you find them, or if they're as complete as, but at least one program exists that you know of called Think Equal, and you can give this program to 48,000 children in England for exactly the same cost as it costs the English government now to pay for the incarceration in prison for 1 year of one violent offender. What kind of idiotic world are we living in? Does the Treasury even have a calculator? What are we talking about? This is like insanity, right?
I know others need to talk, but just one quick question. Because I'm just curious about, you said that brain development happened in the first few years. And what, according to my knowledge, is that 70% of brain develops in the first year. So I was just wondering that what part do you have something for infant? Because those years are...
Sadly, we don't, because we judge that we can't get into the homes. We're not welcome in the homes necessarily, right? And apart from that, it's not realistic. If we do this, it has to be at scale. It has to be for every single child in every setting in the whole world, right? So we can't be naive enough to think that we'll get into the homes and work with connection, serve and return, all those crucial things that have to take place in the very early years. And of course, those early years are critical, but we can't do anything. So we focus on the 3 years we can do everything about, which are 3 to 6, and we still have ample time to put in the foundation for pro-social outcomes in life. And that's all we focus on very narrowly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leslee and Afshan. That was really good. And we are kind of running out of time. I just wanted to mention that, Leslee, I have, by the way, I took my granddaughter to Leslie's place when I was in London. And she took one of her books and read through. It's a picture book meant for the kids. She read through, and my granddaughter, who was 3 years old then, she was just fascinated, just engrossed in that. And when Leslie was reading through and talking to my granddaughter, she was engrossed in it, and she was reacting and fascinated, and she was coming out with answers and questions. I mean, it was amazing. Now, what I would like to say is that we have introduced 4 of you. You've got your emails and so on. There is lots more work to discuss, and please keep on talking to you guys, because you've got substance that's extensive, lots of experience, lots of knowledge, and you can exchange information with each other. So I would like to
talking to the mayor of Edmonton. He should be joining those other 2 enlightened mayors. Let's start a mayoral coalition around the world. If the education ministries aren't doing it, let's find other ways.
Yeah. I had tried to get the mayor here, by the way, Mayor Sohi, numerous times, and it was extremely difficult because he's tied up, and I guess his schedule is very busy. So we'll try it some other time, and we will continue this discussion further. Thank you very much. And Anna, we thank you too.
Thank you.
And have a nice rest of the Sunday. It's a Sunday, by the way, so have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.